All right. So we are doing basically we're doing our sort of basics of Judaism, halacha, Jewish law, and tonight is very much about conducting the Seder, sort of the basic how to. I'm going to kind of this time I'm going to go chronologically, and I'm not only I'm going to do it chronologically, I'm kind of going to do it chronologically. Um, I'm going to do it in a fashion in which it also accommodates or deals with this year and the 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 aspects of this year which are special because it is Erev Pesach, which falls on Shabbos. Okay, so all right, here we go. So let's just quickly review. Selling chametz, you're going to want to sell your chametz on Friday. Fast of the firstborn. Actually, let me go really chronologically. Thursday during the day is the fast of the firstborn. Thursday night is the search for chametz. Friday morning is the fake burning of the chametz because we're not really we do it so we don't forget for the next year, and we also sell our chametz that we will that we are may not be able to completely destroy before Pesach. Services are going to actually be, there is a Friday night meal at the shul, which I understand there's a lot of people signed up for already. We will have essentially a minimal amount of bread for everyone. You will eat it. That is a form of destroying chametz. The next morning, 8:30, we will start davening. About 10 o'clock, we will get to the kiddush. Kiddush will have a little bit of bread, some other food, and we'll finish our first meal of Shabbat. Saturday afternoon, you should have potatoes and fruit and non-matzah products generally. Some people eat egg matzah, some people don't. I would recommend against eating egg matzah. Fruit, protein, vegetables, potatoes, those are all good things to eat so you don't get ridiculously hungry for your Seder. And then I should have here my trusty dusty Shara Tzedek calendar. So what does trusty dusty Shara Tzedek calendar say? It says that the Seder begins at 8:53 p.m. And what that means is that you can start preparing for your Seder at 8:53 p.m. My strong recommendation is that you eat your Shabbat meals on the veranda, on the porch, at the shul, various places, but you do not eat them on your dining room table. Your dining room table should be set for your Seder from before Shabbat, so that you are ready to go at 8:53 p.m. because God knows it's late enough. I would also recommend a nap Erev Shabbat. I'm sorry, Erev Yom Tov, Shabbat afternoon. So you're ready to roll. You can also review Haggadah. You can do things like that. As soon as we get home from shul, boom, boom, we're into Seder action. The Seder begins, of course, with Kiddush. We have discussed at length in various contexts wine, but I'll just repeat it very quickly. It is good to drink wine. If you have a little trouble digesting wine, you can do your wine with grape juice. If you really can't handle in any level. So if you're completely wine averse, you can drink tea or coffee. Would also work. Last week, Itai said, "Where do you get that from?" So the Ramah says you can. When they didn't have wine, they drank mead, honey, and so Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and others also suggest that. Okay, now we are up to make kiddush. We recline during the kiddush. Again, men generally are required to recline, and for women, there's a position of a very interesting rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Yoel Halevi, who said, "Sit up straight like you would in front of the queen," and that's what women do. Okay, now follow with me if you know the song Kadesh Orchatz. So Orchatz. Orchatz is the next thing that we do, and we do it we wash our hands. We wash our hands, but we do not make a bracha. I would say that this washing of the hands is a little trick that we use to get people to ask questions, and then we are going to dip something in salt water. Now I say something, we call it the karpas, but the question is, what is the definition of karpas? What qualifies as a karpas? Because there are a couple of primary minhagim. There's celery, there is parsley, some people use potatoes. What do they all have in common? They're all borei priyadama. Their blessing is all a blessing about the that which comes from the ground. Now, I think because this ritual is one which is meant to inspire questions. This is a ritual which is meant to get people to say, "Wait a minute, that's weird." So my suggestion is you can use something as odd as a banana, as pineapple, cilantro, anything, right? Whatever's going to make people say, what are you doing to us? Now we dip it in salt water, right? The salt water, of course, is a remembrance of the tears of our ancestors, but the idea is to make people ask questions. Now, I'll tell you one other interesting suggestion I heard about karpas. You do not need to lean for karpas, and according to Rabbi Benny Lau, he says that you should do karpas outside on the patio. Let people mingle around. Now, in Israel, it's so much more civilized. Why? First of all, the sun does not set nearly as late. Second of all, in Israel, they don't manipulate the clocks. Or I should say, they do manipulate the clocks such that Pesach is not ridiculously late because it's a country for Jews. So it runs on Jewish schedule, right? And so I guess if we're going to start our Seder at 9 p.m., probably in Israel, they're going to start theirs at 7:30 or something like that. Maybe even a little earlier. I don't know. But even so maybe you have time for a little bit of stroll there for Rabbi Lau. I would not recommend that here. When you're starting at 9 o'clock, social hour can be a little bit difficult. Okay, now, after we do the karpas, Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. So we're going to break the middle matzah. Now, pause here for matzah identification. Why do we have three matzahs? Now, there are a lot of good reasons, but there's only one true one, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure you heard Cohen, Levi, Israel, right? Maybe
Suf.
Yam Suf. Why Yam Suf, Shlomo?
Hatzaya.
Okay, that's just the breaking. So I could break one. I don't need three, right?
Yeah.
I think the answer is like this. When you make motzi on any Shabbat or Yom Tov, how many whole loaves do you have? Three whole loaves. So now, once you break one, how many are you left for your motzi? You're going to have 1.5 if you started with two. So we start with three. And so the two other loaves are going to be your motzi loaves. And the intermediate one is going to be your broken one. Now, when we break that, we have a declaration. The declaration is interestingly in Aramaic. Why is it in Aramaic? Because it was meant to be something everyone understands. When the Haggadah was written, that was the lingua franca. That's what they spoke in the streets. Today, that is not what they speak in the streets. So, I would say this of the paragraphs you should say in English. That's for sure one of them. What is the ultimate articulation of this paragraph is this is the bread of affliction which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. It is interesting. Stick a pin in this. Matzah, I'm going to say it again to you. This is the bread of affliction which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Why do we eat matzah according to this breaking matzah ritual declaration? Is it the bread of freedom or the bread of slavery? Don't all answer at once.
It's both. It's both.
At this point, it's not both. I agree with you, it's both.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, it is not both.
Don't we say this is the bread of affliction?
This is the bread of affliction, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's what it is. It's the bread of affliction. So that's a little bit weird because we all know, and we're going to get to that later, why it's not bread of affliction. Because if they didn't have time to rise, we were running out so fast, right? That's a freedom thing. But here, in this stage, it is a bread of affliction, and we announce it as such. It's the bread of affliction. The there's an explanation for this. The Avud Raham, a early commentary on the Siddur and the Haggadah, is considered part of the Siddur. So he says that the idea is that I think he cites, some scenario in India. Maybe it was naan bread. I don't know. Maybe it's hardtack. Not exactly sure what he's referring to, but he says that they have this slow digesting bread for slaves who work in the fields, so they don't, you can feed them and they can work all day and they don't get hungry. And so that's why you have this kind of bread of affliction. Well, it's sort of a slow digesting bread. And that's why there's a custom to eat prunes on Pesach. But the idea is that there's explanation for why the matzah is a slow digesting bread. Okay, so that's we break the middle matzah. Now, a couple other things about breaking the middle matzah. There are two pieces when you break a matzah. The bigger one is the afikoman. The smaller one you keep. I always like to tell my Seder guests, we're poor. We can't eat sumptuously at this point. We're going to save some for later. And then we put that aside for the afikoman. Okay, now we've broken the matzah. We have hopefully done enough things oddly that someone will ask the question. Even if they don't ask the question, we will force them to ask the question. And that question is called Manishtana, the Fir Kashas. You can call it anything you want. You should read it, preferably in a language you understand. And the question is a question of contrast. Nechama Leibovich has a very interesting designation. She says there are questions and there are kashas, right? So a kasha is a contradiction between two things. It is a compare and contrast. And so these are all compare and contrasts. Why is this different than that, right? And it's a classically Jewish kind of thing to try and interpret between two different kind of states, right? Why on other nights are we eating bread and tonight only matzah, right? And when you think about it, by the way, this is a good question. I'm just going to pontificate that on this for just a minute. Why is it that we eat matzah? Why did God in his infinite wisdom say, you guys should eat matzah and abandon bread? So I'll give you two radically different answers to that question. One answer is what I would say the conventional answer. The conventional answer is that there is an identity to the Jewish people. There is a special identity that is born out of a certain experience and that is memorialized and reenacted in certain rituals, one of which is eating matzah. It makes matzah identity food. There is a difference between someone who stops eating bread for a whole week and someone who says, I eat like everybody else. I'll walk into any restaurant. I'll eat like any good Canadian. I will have craft dinner. I will have Maple Leaf Farms. I don't know if I'm missing any of the other great Canadian foodstuffs, but right, poutine, I guess. There's a difference between there's just an identity difference. The way in which you conceive of yourself, the way in which you remember your history, it's a totally different thing. I would suggest, by the way, a very, very good thing to read, Ben-Gurion's address, I think, to the Peel Commission. Might not be the Peel Commission. To the United Nations. This is the one where Ben-Gurion says, many of you have ancestors who came across in the Mayflower. Does anybody know what day the Mayflower set sail? Does anybody know what they ate on board? Find that quote of Ben-Gurion. It's a winner. It's a surefire winner. Because he tells you every Jew knows what date we left Egypt, 15th of Nisan, and every Jew knows what they ate for dinner. And so matzah's identity food. That's your answer number one. What's answer number two? Answer number two is a radical one. You should try it on for size. The answer is that of the Beis HaLevi. It's a brisker. And he says, because it says, Ba'avur zeh, because of this. Right? Because of this, God took us out of Egypt. Meaning, why do you eat matzah on Seder night? God told me to. That's all I need to know. we Jews, we follow God's word. God, he showed what he could do in Egypt. I'm taking it on faith at this point, right? Why do I eat matzah? God told me to. Both of those are very legitimate answers to that question. They're both well trodden, and they both have spiritual teeth to them, and they can have robust debate around them. Because the Beit HaLevi is he's crazy. Well, not crazy, but it's startling because what he's saying is that God took us out of Egypt so that we could eat matzah. And so it flips everything on its head. But the idea is that a Jew is a commanded creature, commanded by Sinai. And so there's something very special about all of that. So that's sort of a piece of the Manishtana. Okay. After the Manishtana, we've asked these 4 questions. The answer is Avadim hayinu lefar Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. So this is a very good, simple answer. It directly answers the question. Why are you doing this? Because Pharaoh took us out of Egypt. I'm just pulling up my Haggadah. So I have everything on tap. I don't. Let me actually pull it up for everyone. Okay. Boom. Okay. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, right? So this contains a couple of important things that just to remember for your Seder. One is it has the concept that if God had not taken us out of Egypt, we and our children's children and our children's children would still be slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, right? We'd still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. So therefore, each of us is going to see it as if this is what's happening to us right now. That we are telling the story as if we are coming out of Egypt. And then it also says, even we're all intelligent and wise, right? It's a mitzvah for us to elaborate on the story of the Passover. Okay, so that is the first answer of to the question. Now, the truth is, my advice to you, given the length of time, if you have very patient guests and you're planning to be up till 4 in the morning or even 2, no problem. Include every word of the Seder. I just find that I'm always pressed for time. I skip these 2 paragraphs about Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, and the Seders about the stories about Seders. The 4 sons, I don't think you can skip. The 4 sons is important. I think that the ultimate lesson of the 4 sons is that the Seder has to work for everybody. There are different kinds of people. Maybe the most important of the 4 sons, by the way, is the wicked son. Because the wicked son, first of all, what's interesting is in the Torah, each one of the 4 sons comes from a different part in the Torah where it tells you have to tell this story to your children. In the wicked son's version, he says the question. He doesn't ask the question. And so he is the uncurious child. He is the one who challenges without actually asking. And I have to tell you, it sounds like a congressional hearing, right? Congressional hearings are designed to do gotcha, right? Maybe also a question period in Parliament. Same deal, right? Nobody's exploring answers, right? What's the difference between a conversation and a debate? Conversation, you want to learn and grow from the discourse. A debate, somebody's looking to win and nobody's listening in between. So, and the other piece of this, and this is I think a very important point, is that in the wicked son, it talks about for me and not for him. The idea is, what is this to you? The idea that you stand outside of the story of the Jewish people, I think that's a very significant issue. All right, moving on. This paragraph, Yachol me Rosh Chodesh, you could have said to this from Rosh Chodesh is actually I'm not 100% necessary, but this one, the next section, In the beginning, our ancestors were idol worshippers. This is more important than you think. There is a debate between the rabbis about what is the what is the answer to the Abadim Hayinu? I'm sorry, to the Manishtana. Is it we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt? What's the beginning of the story? Is it we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt? Or it was in the beginning our forefathers were idol worshippers? So why would idol worshippers be beginning of the story of Passover? Passover is all about liberation. Passover is about redemption. There's two different kinds of redemption. One kind of redemption is political redemption. So if you're talking about political redemption, you're going to start with we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. If you're talking about spiritual redemption, you're talking about a spiritual awakening, appreciating God in your life, then you got to tell the story from here. From the beginning, our forefathers were idol worshippers. It's a very good time to just talk about the spiritual discovery. When do you feel God in your life? Are you cognizant that there's a God in this world who's guiding you, the Jewish people, your family, from time immemorial? It's a good place to do that. Okay. Let me just there was a comment in the chat. So I'm just going to ask people to do me one favor, just because I try and keep up with the chat for questions. Some people use it for, and they may be occasionally very good and funny things, but I would just ask you to either use them for constructive comments or questions, because that will help me be better here. Okay. Okay. So now we come to what I think is one of the most important parts of the Seder. I believe if you didn't listen to the episode on the story of the Maranos in the Marano practices for Pesach, it's on the website. You got it in the email. You should go back and listen to it, because I think it has some great material for V'hisha Amda. It talks about the sacrifices that our ancestors have undergone to keep the Seder. There's also if you like these kinds of stories, there's a beautiful, beautiful story in Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon's Haggadah on the Seder in Bergen-Belsen. And I think I put it out before, but I will try and dig into the archives to send it out again if people want it. It's a beautiful story. It's, again, similar kind of story. It's a story about, in the darkest of times, people figured out how to do Sedarim, and so we should too. There's also hold on. I want to just see if I can find this. This is cute. I'm seeing if I can find it. I did not find it, but it's a cute thing. I'm going to try and put it out again. It's a cute little chart. It goes, Egyptian Empire, Jews, X. There's no Egyptian Empire. Then the next one is, it goes Babylonian or Assyrian Empire, Babylonian Empire. Trying to think of all the other empires that were there. Babylonian Empire.
The Byzantine,
Persians, Iranians, right? It goes through all the empires, and they're all gone, but the Jews have survived. It's a cute little thing. It's a nice thing to sort of pull out for V'hisha. A guy named Ken Spiro used to put it on a T-shirt and sell in Israel. Okay, now this next section, Magid, from the word Tse Ulamad, come and learn. This section is indispensable. It is what the Mishnah thinks is the core of the Haggadah. It is classic Talmudic exegesis. It's going to have a derivation on every word, and each one is going to be interpreted in its own kind of colorful little way. To the extent that you can, try and bring out some elements on this. It is not unproductive to go to the Torah, to the book of Deuteronomy. Hopefully, I'm going to pick the right chapter. But I didn't. Go back to 24. Guys, close. Okay, here we go. This is the ceremony of the giving of Bikurim. Believe me, I'm not off topic here. The Torah does not, the Haggadah does not choose a narrative from the book of Shemot to base the Haggadah around. Very interesting. It chooses a much shorter narrative that comes from a ceremony which is called the declaration of the first fruits. The first fruits are seen as a surrogate for bringing the land. You want to say, God, thank you for bringing us to the land of Israel, and you can't bring the land with you, so you bring fruits. And so here's what it says. You bring your fruits in a basket, and you bring them to the Kohen, and then it says, Va'anita va'amarti l'fnei Hashem Elokecha. And this is what you shall declare in front of God. And this is where your Haggadah will begin. It starts with the words, Arami Oved Avi. Now, these words, I could give you 20 minutes on these three words, because there's a debate. Is the Arami Lavan, or is the Arami Abraham? Right? If I say the Arami was Lavan, Lavan tried to destroy my father. Right? But if I say the Arami was Abraham, that means my father was a wandering Aramean. Right? They both fit into this. Two different rabbis are one's going to say it refers to Abraham, one's going to say it refers to Lavan. It's a beautiful interpretation. And the truth of the matter is both are true, right? There are people who tried to destroy us, and we also suffered because we wandered. It is in a capsule. It's the story of the Jewish people. Tell the story of the wandering of your families. You went down to Egypt. You were few in number, and then you became a great nation there, right? This is also core of the story. Right? Why did we go down to Egypt? We needed to become a nation. What made us in Egypt into a nation? Adversity made us into a nation. Now we're going to have a little sentence on the adversity of the Egyptians. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us and imposed heavy labor upon us. And another part of the story, spiritual redemption. We called out to God, and God heard our voice, right? And heard our suffering. And God took us out of there with a strong hand and outstretched arm and with wonders. That's it. Those sentence 5, 6, 7, 8. That's it. We'll see. We're going to go back to the Haggadah. We're going to see, right, that we have sentence 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to go through those. That's what this Magid section is. Just those 5 psukim. It's going to be a rabbinic interpretation. This comes, I think, from the Midrash Tanaim on Devarim, which is just a very technical thing. Most of you have probably not leafed through this. It's a sort of obscure midrash, but that is what it is, and that's going to lead us right into 10 plagues. And the 10 plagues it's interesting because at the end of the 10 plagues, I'm going to show you something interesting that comes out of this, but we're going to go through the 10 plagues. At the 10 plagues, you're going to take drops out of your wine cup, and you're going to put them on. Hopefully, you have a plate under your wine cup. I would strongly advise putting a plate under your wine cup when you set the table, because you're going to want to make sure that you have something to catch it. That way, the dinner plate does not end up full of wine. Now, this is sort of an interesting thing. Honestly, now you can see why Seders go on forever, because I could just talk for hours about this. Titzach Adash Be'achav is a kind of an interesting bit. It really, let me go to the Hebrew here for a second. The Hebrew is going to be, Titzach stands for Dam Tzvardei Akinim. So Dam Tzvardei Akinim is one couplet. Adash, Arav Dever Shchin is another triplet. Be'achav is Barad Arbe Choshech is the next one. And Machat Bechorot, which is the final bet, the final bet actually stands on its own. And so it's very interesting. The first two plagues always, they come with the same warnings. The first one is always, you meet Pharaoh by the river. Second one is always meet Pharaoh, Boel Paro, go to Pharaoh. Third one comes, no warning. Same deal with the next two, so you can plot them out. What is also interesting, I know that we were all raised with this midrash that, the Jew was drinking out of his straw, got pure water, and the Egyptian drinking out of his straw got blood. That's not how the Torah lays it out. So we have to figure that the words of the Torah have some kind of meaning, and you don't really get a difference between only at kinim, only at lice, do we see the Egyptian magician can't reproduce it, and then arov, we see that the wild animals do not go into the area of the Jewish people. This Rabbi Yehuda put signs among them is a way of saying there is a code here. There's a pattern to be deciphered. The pattern could be an hour-long discussion, but again, it is a place to have further conversation. Now, to be quite frank, the next stuff I always skip. This is called plague mathematics, right? How many plagues were there at the splitting of the sea? It's again, it is a way of contemplating the wonder of the Exodus. But when you're pressed for time, that's not where I feel like the bang for your buck comes. Okay, so we're still in plague mathematics until we get to Dayenu. And Dayenu is really plague mathematics in a song. Now, what is very interesting about Dayenu is Dayenu really doesn't make sense. Because let's just take one. Okay. If God had split the sea for us, but not brought it through on dry land, that would have been enough for us. I don't know about you. I would have been really upset if the miracle was just split the sea and then I get stuck in the mud, right? Or if my enemies came out the other side, that would also not have been so good, right? Or God didn't feed us in the desert. That also would have been not so good. There's a very interesting custom, by the way. One I recommend with a gentle hand. There is a custom I learned from Shlomo Yekutieli, and I believe it's very common in Sephardic cultures, to take scallions, green onions, and you whip the person next to you. Why do you whip the person next to you? Because it is a way of, it's a kapara. It's a way of saying, when we crossed the desert, we didn't sing Dayenu. When we crossed the desert, we said to God, we remember the onions that we ate in Egypt. So we take a spring onion and we, in a sense, we beat each other with it to say, we should have said Dayenu. One other thing I want to just say about Dayenu, there is a common saying about children, and that it goes like this. When our children are young, they're so cute, we could eat them up. And when they grow up, we wonder why we didn't. Right? So the Dayenu is like that. In other words, there's moments, especially when you have a young child, you say, could not get any better than this. I want to freeze time, right? I want to freeze time and just thank God for the beauty of this moment, right? But that's not how the world works, right? There has to be progress, but doesn't mean that you can't say thank you for that. Okay, so that's Dayenu, sing Dayenu. Now, another indispensable part of the Seder is Rabban Gamliel's three things: Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. And each one of these is its own philosophical concept. Pesach is, as I explained on Shabbat, I might write this up. The idea of Pesach is that it is a refuge, or it is a sense of provenance, that God is guiding us through history. And so the Pesach is the fact that the Jew has a different destiny, and you have to appreciate that. The matzah is the fact that we we appreciate that we this food now. I said earlier in the evening that this food was the sign of affliction. Now this food is the sign of freedom, right? Why are we eating the matzah? It tells us, we ask, why do we eat the matzah? And it says, it recalls the dough of our ancestors, which did not have time to rise before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, revealed Himself and redeemed them, right? And then it quotes the verse. The idea is that the matzah represents transformation, right? The Jews have the ability to transform the difficult into the sublime, and that's what matzah is. Matzah is a transformation. Bitter herbs are also part of the picture, right? We would not be the people we are without the bitter pressure that has seasoned the Jewish people. I think that's a very special quality that we have. All right, now you are into your next section, and your next section is going to be Hallel. Now that's where your second cup of wine comes in. You want to make sure your second cup of wine is filled. I should also mention that we do not fill our own cups of wine. The idea of the Seder is everybody fills another person's wine because you want to feel like you are being served, right? Each person is a, if you will, a king and queen at the table. I won't go on terribly long about this Hallel, but try and sing it, try and make it joyous. There's a lot to be said about this, but the very last words of this section are the blessing that we say at the end of it, and this. Sorry, hold on. I want to get to Lefichach, actually. Introduction. Therefore, it's a way of saying that everything that we've done up till now in the Seder, right? Therefore, it is our duty to thank, praise, laud, glorify, and exalt, honor, bless, raise high, and acclaim. The idea is that this experience of telling the story has brought you to the point where you say, okay, I need to say thank you. In saying thank you, we use the words of the Tehillim. There's an interesting debate about that. And then finally, there's the blessing about redemption. And after this blessing of redemption, we drink the second cup of wine. Yes, Mordechai.
Why do we have two halves of the Hallel?
I think that the reason you have two halves of the Hallel is because the rabbis did not think that you could really suffice with just those two paragraphs. It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I will plead nether. That'll be a good question to take for next week. But I think what the general concept is that just two paragraphs is not enough, because Hillel and Shammai debate whether or not you end. Hillel says, I believe you end here. Ema badim smecha hallelujah. And Shammai says you go all the way to you say B'tzeit Israel. So there's a debate about where you end. I could go on about that debate. It's a very interesting debate about whether it's a political redemption or a spiritual redemption, but time does not afford. Okay, now you're drinking the second cup of wine, you're leaning, and now comes the serious business, because now you got to get to various types of activities. You wash your hands, this time with a bracha, and you're going to make motzi matzah. Now, motzi matzah is complicated. If you have your own three matzot, what you're going to do is you're going to make the bracha of hamotzi while holding all three matzahs, and you drop the bottom matzah, because now you're not making hamotzi anymore. You've had your 2 loaves for hamotzi, and then you're going to make the bracha of asher kiddishanu mitzvotav al achilat matzah, right? The blessing on the mitzvah of eating matzah. And that's going to be on the top 2. Now, you want to eat essentially a half sheet of matzah, of shmur matzah, for your first installment of matzah. That is a sum total. You want to make it, part of it should come from the broken matzah, part of it should come from the top matzah. Often, at Seders, there's 1 or 2, 3, 4 liters. That's fine. The leaders are going to distribute. I suggest having like a couple different colored plates so people can know, oh, this plate was the broken matzah. This one was the whole top matzah. And you give people to take from each. Obviously, if let's say I have 8 people at my Seder and I have 1 set of matzahs, one set of matzahs not going to get everybody to a half a sheet. It's just math, right? So you have extra matzahs that are fillers. You have that box of matzah that you can use to add matzot to other people's plates. Okay? All right. Now, so that's matzah. Now, the bottom matzah, you're going to save for your Hillel sandwich and your afikomen. And, but before there's a debate, by the way, about whether or not you salt your matzah. I think Ashkenazic tradition maybe favors salting, but it's a 50-50 debate. You want to lean when you eat your matzah. You lean to the left when you eat your matzah. So once again, you're making the bracha on 3 loaves together, dropping, then making the second blessing on the 2 loaves, or the 1.5 loaves of matzah. Then you're going to break it up, and you're going to put them on 2 different plates so people can take one from each part of the matzah, and they'll add in from reserves in the box. It is also a good idea to give a lot of this explanation beforehand, because you're really not supposed to make any interruptions between the blessing and the eating of the matzah. You have, by the way, about, let's say, 7-8 minutes to eat your matzah. I would take it easy. This stuff doesn't digest super well, so I would chew comfortably. Once you see that everybody has finished their matzah, then we can go on to the maror. Let's talk for a moment about what you can use for maror. Now, the preferred things for maror are varieties of lettuce. My personal opinion is, first of all, the standard rabbinic opinion is that romaine lettuce, well checked for bugs, is the best thing to eat for maror. I disagree, because romaine lettuce is cultivated not to be bitter. And I think you should have a bitter herb. I prefer radicchio. Radicchio is good and bitter and makes for excellent maror.
Dandelion is even more bitter.
Yeah. Again, dandelion would work. There are other ones. Endive. Endive is good, but the problem with endive is that endive is sometimes grown on shelves and people aren't sure whether it's still Brei Pri Adama. They try to make it, they grow it in the dark, oddly, so it doesn't get a weird color. Anyhow, now some people, especially if you are from Polish-Lithuanian extraction, are very horseradish focused. The reason is you weren't getting any lettuce in Latvia or in Vilna in March, right? You were lucky if it thawed. So so they would use horseradish in this place. Horseradish, you're allowed to combine, and often that's what we do at the Rosenblatt house. This year, your horseradish is going to be a little bit flat, because you're supposed to grate it. Some people say you grate it before Shabbat and put it in a container and hope for the best. Others are going to say, no, you should grate it. The Vilna Gaon said, grate it with your grater upside down in a sort of funny sort of way to avoid any of Yom Tov restrictions. I simply think you should go with lettuce, because you don't have that problem at all. That's my opinion. I guess I used to be more diplomatic, but now in my old age, I'm going to give you some straightforward kinds of opinions. Okay, so now we've eaten maror, and maror is dipped in charoset. It is not smothered in charoset. It is not vegetables with hummus, right? It is a dip. And then the korech, the hillel sandwich, again, same deal. Except you're taking the matzah and you are putting a little charoset in there, and your maror is in the center, and that is eaten leaning, and there's a declaration beforehand.
Rabbi,
Yes.
what about the prepared horseradish in the jar? Can you not use that as maror?
Pickled maror is no longer considered halachic maror. So once you pickle it with beet juice or whatever else they put in it, which I'm sure are a lot of things, vinegar and sugar and whatever, then it's no longer, that's not maror.
Okay, thank you.
It's good for gefilte fish, but it's not maror. Okay. Then we come to now the egg. The egg is a much maligned part of the Seder plate. The egg on the Seder plate is there as a reminder of the missing holiday offering. It's called the Karban Chagiga. It's also eaten at the beginning of the meal as a sign of mourning. The egg is the mourner's meal. So it shows you that we're missing something at our Seder. If one does not eat the egg, one does not beat one's chest for it on Yom Kippur. It is a custom, non-absolute. Everybody's favorite part of the meal is Shulchan Aruch, eating the meal. Have at it, enjoy, delicious, amazing. Then comes the tzafun. Now, interestingly, the afikomen, the tzafun, is meant to be eaten on a full stomach. Usually, that is the part of the Seder that most people have no problem with. And again, you're eating this leaning. Hopefully, you've gotten your afikomen. I tell my children, there's something called a batna. It's not a halachic term. A batna is a negotiation term. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If you can't find the afikomen, you can just use any old matzah. So the afikomen, you're supposed to find the afikomen. You can add additional matzah to get, once again, to that amount of matzah. Sort of hope to get to a half sheet. You can do less if you have trouble digesting matzah. Even a half sheet, the same amount as a half sheet of machine matzah would be about the same. The advantage of hand shmor matzah is that there's no debate about, when it comes to hand shmor matzah, that hand shmor matzah has been done for the purposes of the mitzvah of matzah. There is a little bit of debate about machine matzah, but I will tell you machine matzah is perfectly kosher, and you will fulfill your obligation with machine matzah. Okay, so you have now eaten your afikomen, leaning, and hopefully negotiated with your children, and then comes birkat hamazon. Using a cup of wine for birkat hamazon was something very normal in the Talmud. It is something sort of very normal, was assumed to be the way in which you would recite birkat hamazon, because it was considered a blessing, just like you have a cup of wine at a wedding, a cup of wine at a bris, so you have a cup of wine at a mitzvah called birkat hamazon. And so at the Seder, that becomes the third of the 4 cups of wine. You're going to say your birkat hamazon. At the end of birkat hamazon, you're going to have I'll get to it, a blessing over the wine. Now comes the cup of Elijah. You should know, the reason Elijah comes to your Seder is because Elijah at Mount Carmel, or actually at Chorev, he says to God, they don't keep your covenant. And God said, I'm going to make you see that they keep the covenant. So that's why he comes to the Seder. The next paragraph, spill out your wrath, is actually something that was added during the Middle Ages when Jews were being horribly oppressed by their German neighbors. And they said, pour out your wrath against the other nations. That's what you say when the door is open. And then we get to the hollow. Again, I would choose singing this. Might want to practice. It is a little bit long. I'm not going to lie. And that brings us to when we finish the hollow, which is which includes even part of the Shacharit service. The Nishmat from Shacharit is part of Hallel. And when we get through all of that, we say Yishtabach. And at the end of the Yishtabach, right, you'll know, hopefully you notice this from Shabbat morning davening, we say the final bracha, the fourth cup of wine. We lean. Don't forget to say your after bracha on the wine. That comes next. And after all of these things, we have the songs about the Seder. Now, this section, Nirtza, totally discretionary. You want to say it, say it. Don't want to say it, don't say it. There used to be a time when they stayed up all night at the Seder, just like they did on Shavuos. I find that wrecks me, so I don't do it. And you sing Lashon Haba B'Yerushalayim, and then if you want to, this is where you find Haggadah, Echad Mi'odea, all the Jewish drinking songs. You are certainly welcome to do this, but don't feel compelled to make this a part of your Seder. Okay, so that has been, yes, Mordechai.
How afflicted are we obligated to, our stomachs have to be if you have a digestive problem?
Well, what are you afflicting it with?
Well, the amount of matzah and
afflictors. There's wine, there's matzah, and there's maror. I assume you're not talking about brisket.
No, brisket is good. It's all the heavy duty swallowing.
Okay, so let's do it like this. Matzah is biblical, so I would say matzah would be my first priority. But I think you can do well with a lesser amount. So you need an olive bulk. So estimate what an olive bulk would be. Okay, I would say about a half sheet of matzah is fine. And the first matzah is the most important one. If you need to skip, you skip the Hillel sandwich. You skip the afikomen. I don't know how much it hurts someone. I certainly don't want someone to have a small intestinal blockage, right? But just be careful with it.
And in the time frame,
time frame 9 minutes. Trust me, you can eat plenty of matzah in 9 minutes.
Okay.
Wine, we discussed, hopefully. You got to know yourself. You need to dilute with grape juice. If you need to dilute with water, you can dilute with water. If you need to drink coffee or tea, abi gesund. Those are things which a person needs to know himself or herself and what their tolerances are. And then maror, I don't know anybody who is going to be troubled by lettuce. So I agree. If horseradish is going to give you an ulcer, right? Let us live in peace. You appreciate that, Mordechai. That was for you.
Thank you. Shukur.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, Ruthie.
Yeah. Can you skip Shfoch Hamatcha El Hagoyim?
I don't think you have to klap achet on Yom Kippur if you skip Shfoch Hamatcha El Hagoyim, especially if you're an Italian Jew. Although I'm learning now a lot about the Italian Jews, and a lot of the great Italian rabbis were actually Ashkenazic rabbis. But again, I think if you skipped Shvoch Hamat, here's what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't skip Shvoch Hamatcha because I have a theological disagreement with the Haggadah. If what you're saying is, look, I've got to get to Hallel in my Haggadah, and I don't want to take extra time to say Shvoch Hamatcha, so I'm gonna. In the same way.
No, that's not the point. The point is the words are very harsh, especially when you have maybe a non-Jew sitting at your table, like mixed marriages and stuff like that. So when I say
so the question is, what does the goyim, right? So here, if you want to say Shvoch Hamatcha El Hagoyim Asher Lo Yedaucha, right? Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and everyone who's holding a hostage, I say Azoy. You want to sing Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael Natunim B'Tzara V'Shivya Omdim Bein Bayam Bein B'Yabasha? At that point, okay, Matov, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that I would, you can. This needs a right kavanah, right?
Yeah.
Right here, ki achalat Yaakov et naveo ishamu. Right, for Jacob is devoured and his place is laid waste. So you want to say that naveo ishamu near Oz, right? Be'eri b'chulei. So I think you can say those things. You can figure out a way to weave in specific kavanot there that I think are not going to be. This is the other thing. When Jews were powerless, right? They turned to Hashem. Whether it's Goyim or Ferdinand and Isabella, whether it's the Counter-Reformation popes, whether it's Khmelnytsky, Hitler, Yamach Shemo. You can find plenty of people who fit the term Goyim. I don't think Goyim means Raoul Wallenberg. I don't think that Goyim means
Yeah, exactly. It's a fine line there, right?
What's his name? I'm now forgetting the name of our prime minister before Trudeau was John Baird was his foreign minister.
Harper.
Stephen Harper. All right. That Shulchan Aruch doesn't refer to Stephen Harper. So yeah, I hear you. But yes, if you have non-Jews at your Seder, you might want to contextualize it.
Right.
And look, I would say also, yeah. Yes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody have a fantastic night and a Chag Kasher V'Sameach and a very Leibedik Seder.